Hi, today I'll be coding something like this, and hopefully it won't take me all day because this is the sort of stuff I'm not really comfortable with. It's very different from my normal simple geometric demos where you just drop in a formula and poof, everything gets generated from there. This involves writing a lot more code, and the more code you have to write, the bigger the probability of something going wrong and then never finishing. However, I hope that won't be the case and I should stop talking and get to coding because moving my mouth is surely not going to help with getting anything done faster. We already have this object here where we have the text for the menu items and also the icons, which are emojis because SVG would take an eternity and we're just going to skip that step. So we're going to get an array out of this object. So object entries. And if you need a reference for this function, it's going to be linked in the description for both the video and the CodePen demo, just so you know. Then we are going to get the length of this array. And we are going to put everything in a nav that includes a for loop. So let I going from 0 all the way up to n, increment this I, and create a link at every step. So obviously, then we are going to put in an attribute that icon, so index I, and for the keys we have index 0, for the values we have index 1, right? And then the text content is going to be the key, so we need to interpolate it, of course, and use index 0 for the key. Okay, then before we move on to prettifying things, we are going to pass that n value to the CSS in a style attribute as a custom property. And that's because we may change this object, we may add entries, we may remove entries, and if we do that, we don't want to need to make any changes to the CSS as well. And if we pass that in, the number of entries to the CSS as a custom property, then we don't need to worry about things. So if we change the object, this n gets updated automatically, the loop gets updated, the number of items here gets updated, so we don't need to worry about anything. We're also going to pass to the CSS the index of the currently selected item, which is going to be k. And also we are going to set indices also as custom properties. So these are going to depend on the loop index. Now let's look a bit at the compiled HTML. As you can see, nothing fancy. Okay, and now let's move on to prettifying things. Now, if you've seen my previous videos, then you know I like to start with something like this. Just set display grid on all these elements. Yeah. Okay. Now, the next step, we are going to want to add those icons. So we're going to have in a before pseudo element, we are going to use that attribute. Let's see it. Okay, that looks nice. And we're going to set dimensions for those menu items. So let's say something like that. So both horizontally for the width and vertically for the height. And a few prettifying styles. Text decoration none. Text transform capitalize, something like that. Okay, let's also set place content center, and we're going to want to set something like that on the body as well, just so I can have everything in the middle. And you can see how that doesn't seem to do anything vertically, and that's because at this point the height of the body is given by the height of its content, which is that nav which only contains those items, these link items. So for that we need to explicitly set the height on the body to the full viewport height. This creates an ugly scroll bar, so let's get rid of it. It's caused by a margin on the body, so if you zero the margin, the scroll bar goes away. We're also going to set a background. Let's say that it's going to be heavy on the red and it's going to have a tiny bit of blue, something like that. And then on the nav, we are going to want to set grid autoflow column Let's also set a background, make it white. Okay, now the thing is, I set grid auto flow to column because these boxes all have the same width explicitly. It's set explicitly. But if they didn't have the width set explicitly, then that wouldn't work as well, because you can see how the text has different lengths, and we have more space for the notification, which has the biggest text length, and smaller for others like home. So yeah, we need that width set explicitly. Now let's also prettify the font. So let's say something like that. Let's also set a font size like this. Make all icons one monocolor. So filter, brightness 0, and this is going to make everything black. Okay, and also we are going to want to get rid of that blue from there, and we're going to set a color, and we're going to use an HSL value 0, because 0 saturation, so the hue doesn't matter. I explained this in a previous video. So the HSL model can be represented as a cylinder. We have the hue going all around the cylinder from 0 to 360 degrees. Then we have the saturation going from the central axis of the cylinder, where it's 0, to the surface of the cylinder, where it's 100%. Then we have the lightness going from 0%, where it's black, to 100%, where it's always white, regardless of the other two components. If the lightness is 0%, regardless of what the hue and saturation are, we get black. If the lightness is 100%, regardless of what the hue and saturation are, we get white. Now, if the lightness is one fixed value and the saturation is 0, then the hue doesn't matter, because for a hue of 7 and a hue of 121 or 207, if the lightness is fixed and the saturation is 0, then we get the same color regardless of what hue we have. So this is not quite what we want. As you can see right here, the selected item is black and the other ones are gray. So that's what we want to have here. And this is going to depend on a selected and not selected flag. So not selected flag. Now, something is not selected if the difference between the index of the currently selected item, which we've set to be k, initially 0, right there, right? And the index of the current item, if that difference in absolute value is different from 0, okay? So different from 0. So this is going to be calc 1 minus the not selected option, right? So we're going to need to get the difference first. This is going to be, if I could type, that would be great. I minus k, right? And we're going to need to get the absolute value, and this is something I explained in detail in an article that's going to be linked in the description for both the video and the CodePen demo, so you can check it out. So basically it's the maximum between its additive inverse, which is -1 times itself, and itself. Okay, and here, so if this absolute value is different from 0, but if it's different from 0 and it's always bigger or equal than 0, then it means it's 1 or bigger than 1. So we are going to use the minimum between 1 and the absolute value. And so So if this absolute value is 0, then the minimum is going to be 0, and not selected is going to be 0. If this absolute value is 1 or bigger, then the minimum is going to be 1, and we're going to get the flag being 1. So now we can use here contrast calc selected times 50%, right? And you can see, just select it like that, right? So we keep it 1 and this stays black, and then like that. Okay, but here we're going to need to use something like that. I was thinking of something else. Oh yeah, not selected, sorry. You can now see how that. Okay, now let's change that K. So on click, so make sure K gets changed on click. So we're going to get the event target, and if this is a link, so if has attribute like that, we are going to get style set property, and the property we set is going to be K, and we're going to take it from the I custom property on our link. So style get property value, that's going to be I. Okay, and of course we want like that. So let's see it. You can see how it changes, and it changes nicely. Now one more thing, we want an effect on focus and hover. So we're going to have a highlight custom property which is set to 1, and here we're going to set filter let's see it. Okay, and let's get rid of the outline. So focus like that, and you can see we've prettified it. That looks good. Okay, now let's say we are going to get padding, something like that, and we are going to set it laterally on the navigation. So we have a bit of a space there, so just laterally, so top and bottom are going to be 0, but here we're going to set padding top, because you can see how we have a bit more space here at the top than we have at the bottom, so we can accommodate for that value right there. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's also set a rounding, and actually for that we are going to use a SAS module. So SAS, so we can have square root. So the radius is going to be yeah, that's so now let's border radius set to that, and let's start setting that value, and we're going to start as a background. So we're going to have radial gradient circle at, and initially we are going to just to use calc K times D this isn't correct, but it's not going to matter. 0, again, this isn't correct, but it doesn't matter. Just put something. Blue, transparent. You can see how we have something, and if we change, you can see how it moves. That's good, but it's not quite what we want. Let's set radius there and transparent 0, and it's starting to look like something, and you can see how it's in that corner. Now let's comment out that padding for a little bit. You can see how it's at the start, so on the very edge. It becomes a bit more obvious if we set something like box shadow. Green or something like that. You can see. Oh, one more thing. We set padding top there, but it gets added to the height, and we don't want that. Box sizing, border box. Okay, much nicer. And you can see how the center is right there on the edge, and that's not what we want. We want to move it by half, so 0.5. Now you can see how it's in the middle. But if we add back this padding, you can see how it's offset again. So we need to add the padding as well. And then we're going to need an offset there at the top, which is going to be half the padding. So something like that. So here, going to have minus the offset. Now we don't want that jagged edge right there, so we are going to use here calc minus half a pixel, and then we're going to take that and just copy paste it here, change the minus to plus, and we get something nicer. Okay, and then we are going to have another radial gradient, and this one is going to be again pretty similar to what we have here actually, but let's use white. Is going to have a much smaller radius. It's going to be half the offset. Again, here it's going to be at half the offset vertically, right? And then here we're going to just half the offset, something like that. That looks nice. So it's going to look something like that, looks smooth and nice. Now we are going to add other radial gradients for that rounding, and those are going to go the other way. They're going to be transparent inside and then colored on the outside. And we're going to use a different color. So we're going to have the transparent, and then, I don't know, gold, something like that. Okay. And it's going to be circle at, and in this case it's going to be in this corner, in the left corner, so that's going to be 0 horizontally, the radius vertically, right? And we are going to position everything using, and of course it's going to go up to the same radius as here, so same radius there, the same thing, only with plus. So something like that, and then we are going to set a background position which is going to start pretty much from what we have right here, and vertically it's going to be at a 0, right? And then we're going to have a background size that is going to be horizontally the radius, vertically that offset. Okay, and obviously we're going to have no repeat. And you can see how that's not correctly positioned, right? So we need to move it by, so minus 1.5 times the radius. You can see how now it's positioned correctly. And I think if we make this black, it becomes a bit more obvious how you can see it there. Okay, we're going to just copy paste this as it is. And we're going to have 100%, and of course here we're going to move the position the other way, so it's going to be plus 0.5, and you can see how now we have that. Okay, now let's switch that black back to transparent, right? And we are going to take this part from here and we're going to use it as a mask. So basically we are going to have, let me just something like that, right? We set the mask here. Okay, we are going to need to set two versions. We're going to have this one, then we're going to have a WebKit one, because that's still necessary. And you can see how what's masked is precisely the opposite of what we want to mask. So, nope, not what we want. Now, first, let's comment out this, the tiny dot radial gradient, right? And we are going to want to invert this. And this is something I explained in this article on mask compositing. And again, this is going to be linked in the description for both the video and the CodePen demo. You know the story, right? And we are going to use something that fully covers everything. And we are going to basically XOR those, the result of these first layers with this layer right here. Because compositing works like this on layers. So you composite the bottom layers, then the third layer with the result of compositing the bottom two ones, and so on. So this is how it works. And here we're going to have exclude add. Okay, I've been writing ass way too many times when I mean to write add. And you know what feature would be great? One that actually puts on the screen what you mean to type and not what you actually type. That would be a great feature. Now, the thing is, for the non-standard WebKit mask composite, we have different values. So this one is going to be XOR, and add is actually source over. So it looks like that, and you can see it now how it changes. And the thing is, we have add in between these two, and in between this and the result of the previous ones, and here we're going to have exclude, right? But if we add this one, we're going to have again exclude between these two at the bottom, which is good, which is what we want. Now, having done this, let's get rid of those ugly guidelines and let's animate things, because you can see how it's looks pretty nice at this point, but let's animate things. That's going to be much nicer. Let's make this slightly smaller there. Like that. Looks better, I think. Okay, so animation. We are going to register that K custom property syntax, this is basically the type, which is number. We are going to have initial value, which is going to be 0, inherits true, and then here we're going to set transition. We're going to transition that to k, and I don't know, something like that, and we're going to use a custom function. So for some reason that didn't work. Syntax number, initial, I cannot type. You can see how now. Okay, let's use a bouncing transition. So basically that means it's going to go back, and then it's going to go past the value and then back home. And this means that we're going to have bounce both at the beginning, which is going to go back from the value that we're at, and at the end. And at the beginning means we're going to have a first y value below 0, and at the end means we're going to have a second y value above 1. Normal interval is between 0 and 1. And again, I'm going to link to a graphic illustrating that. It's going to be in the description for both the video and the CodePen demo. You know the poetry. So we're going to have the same x for both of them, and here we said we're going to have a negative first y value, 0.5 for the second x value, and the second y value is going to be above 1. So let's see it now. You can see it now. This looks nice. Okay, I don't think I'm going to play with it any further. It looks good enough. I'm going to leave it like this. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you like the work that I'm putting out since early 2012 and you want me to be able to do more in the future, please consider supporting it. You can do so by being a cool cat and becoming a patron on Patreon. Huge thanks to everyone who has been supporting me so far. Or if monthly support is not your style, there's the option of one-time donation. Or you can make this cat happy with a gift off her wish list. Or you could at least share this to show the role what can be done in CSS these days, and a sprinkle of JS, because honestly I think it's pretty damn cool. In any event, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!